Welcome to our new program, False Friends of Fatima. My name is Richard Lehrberger, and I'll be sitting in for Father Gruner. And of course, we have with us our guest who's returning, Christopher Ferrara, to talk about his new book, False Friends of Fatima. Chris, thank you very much for being back with us.
Thanks for having me on the show, and I'm happy to be here to continue this discussion we've been having about this whole phenomenon of the false friends of Fatima. I think in the last thing we were talking about a rather curious fellow named Carlos Evaristo.
Yeah, this fellow back in 1992, this obscure layman just appears out of nowhere and has this claim that he sat down for 2 hours with Sister Lucy and had an interview with her in which he supposedly held hands with a cloistered nun for the better part of the 2-hour interview.
Ludicrous. But you know, we've been showing thematically as we proceed through this discussion of my book that what was happening in the late 90s, late 80s, early 90s was the imposition of what we've called a party line on Fatima. Because Fatima in its essentials is the traditional Catholic faith. It refers to the consecration of Russia, the conversion of Russia, the triumph of the Immaculate Heart. It's all about the four last things: death, judgment, heaven, and hell. The seers saw the vision of hell. They saw the souls were condemned to hell, and Our Lady says, to save them, she will come to prescribe the consecration of Russia, the communions of reparation on the first Fridays, and so forth. Now, this is quintessentially Catholic, but as we've been discussing in the previous episodes, the Church underwent a dramatic change during and after the Second Vatican Council. And so, in keeping with this change, the windows of the Church were opened, and we mentioned how Paul VI lamented that and said that through a fissure from somewhere or other, he said, meaning these open windows, the smoke of Satan has entered the Church. So there's been basically a war on the old orientation of the Church by this new party of the innovators. And they want to change everything, including the message of Fatima. So in this context, this fellow Evaristo, who has a high school or even a grade school education, he calls himself a historian, but as far as I know, he has no history degree. After being seen, photographed with two Vatican secretaries of state.
Right, on separate occasions with Sodano and Casaroli.
Yes, these chief diplomats of the Church who are managing the Church's new orientation and the Church's new relation to communist powers, meaning appeasement and accommodation. After seeing these two secretaries of state, he suddenly gets unprecedented access to Sister Lucy. And in the last episode, we talked about how he conducts a so-called interview, which was repudiated by the official translator of the interview, Father Pacheco, who said that the pamphlet reflecting the interview should not be published because it's full of lies and distortions. And Evaristo later admitted that it really wasn't a transcript of what Sister Lucy said. To quote what I mentioned in the last episode, he said, although I may have a bad memory, this reconstruction of what was said was not largely made by me. I only typed it. Well,
now, correct me if I'm wrong, but Father Pacheco, he condemned the pamphlet.
Right.
And Evaristo is saying now that, well, he typed the manuscript. So there were only two other people present in the interview, and neither of them spoke Portuguese. So
right, it was Father Pacheco and Carlos Evaristo. If Pacheco says it's full of lies and Evaristo says I only typed it, then clearly the pamphlet is utterly worthless.
Right.
And we noted how in the pamphlet there's an effort to have Lucy contradict everything that Our Lady said in terms of the consecration and conversion of Russia, and basically to begin a revision of the Fatima message in keeping with this party line. Now, he tries again, as you noted, in 1993, a second attempt at an interview, a year to the day later, October 11th, 1993.
But this time, it wasn't just 3 other people. He had basically an entourage with him, correct?
He brings in an entire entourage, which is extraordinary, too, I mean, because you need Vatican permission to meet with Sister Lucy. And this fellow Evaristo, who has no credentials that I know of, other than apparently a willingness to twist and distort and revise the message of Fatima, is allowed to enter the convent with a huge entourage, including a cardinal, and an audio and videotaping equipment.
Yeah, and
October 11th, 1993, a year after the first pamphlet was created.
Right, but correct me if I'm wrong, in this new creation, and it's just a play on the old title, it all started with 2 Hours with Sister Lucy. Basically, in this particular interview, he doesn't have any attestations at all from the people that were with him. So he claims that there are at least 7 other people with him.
Right.
But he doesn't actually have any attestations from these people who were present.
None at all. And we've never seen the audio or videotapes he claims to have made.
Oh, okay, I see, yeah.
I've never seen them posted anywhere. And this is the age of the internet. It would be a simple matter for him to set up a site where you could go and click on something and see the video of Sister Lucy revising the message of Fatima. Now, let me say something about this second pamphlet. In the second pamphlet, he makes a pretty devastating admission about the first pamphlet. We already know that Father Pacheco condemned the first pamphlet and said that it was full of gross lies and distortions, and that Evaristo admitted that it really wasn't a literal translation, he only typed it. Well, in the second pamphlet, it all started with 2 hours with Sister Lucy. He says this. This, he says, meaning the first interview, is not a literal translation. It is a conceptual translation. The language used in this document is based on the actual Portuguese dialogue. What kind of a translator gives you a conceptual translation?
Exactly, yeah, we need the actual transcript.
Right. Well, now, during the second interview, we have more of the same. And he goes through this, as I show in my book, this meaning the message of Fatima, systematically revising the meaning of everything in the message. So if you want to take these topics one at a time, we can. It's basically, as I say in the book, less of the same of what we see in the first interview. He revisits the same themes, which are basically that the conversion of Russia doesn't mean the conversion of Russia. The consecration of Russia doesn't mean the consecration of Russia by name, which is preposterous. And the period of peace that Our Lady promised upon the consecration of Russia, well, that's what we have now, which is another ludicrous contention.
Yeah, and does he not actually attribute to Sister Lucy that what Our Lady meant by peace was peace from atheistic-inspired wars?
Well, let's take
Yeah.
this one at a time. First of all, we have to talk about the fundamental element of the prophetic content of the message of Fatima, in terms of something new that heaven has prescribed to regulate human behavior in our time. Because as Father Gruner mentioned, when God sends a prophet to the church in times of trouble for the church, it isn't to announce some new doctrine. It's to tell us what we must do at that particular epoch in salvation history for the correction of human conduct. So here the basic prophetic element is there's going to be a consecration of Russia. Russia, which has been the source of so much suffering in the world, not only in Russia, but communist China, world communism, the philosophical errors of Russia, which have spread throughout the world, including the idea that women have the right to own their own bodies and kill their own children in the womb. All of this will be reversed by reversing the spiritual state of Russia, which is one of apostasy, into a state of conversion. And Lucy never understood conversion as applied to Russia in any sense other than an integral conversion to the Catholic faith, which Russia lost during the great schism of the eastern part of the church from Rome. So in the second interview, Evaristo presses Sister Lucy, at least that's what he tells us. We don't have a transcript. We have no confirmation, to revise the meaning of conversion. So he asks her, so it is true that the consecration is done, right? True? The classic leading question, putting words in the witness's mouth. And Sister Lucy, according to his second pamphlet, says, yes, it is true, it is done. And Evaristo then says, in 1993, and Russia has started to convert. No? Again, putting words in the witness's mouth.
Right, he's leading her.
And Sister Lucy is reported to have said, yes, it has started to convert. Ellipses, the word ellipses, conversion. We should not give ears to those people who say otherwise. Now, that's not the way Lucy speaks. We should not give ears. The word conversion, to convert, indicates a change. A conversion is a change. Evaristo, yes. And then Lucy is supposed to have said, a change from evil. It does not indicate that all evil will disappear, but just a conversion from evil to good. So, in other words, bad Russia is now good Russia. There's no conversion to Roman Catholicism.
Yeah, and clearly that's what Our Lady intended when she appeared at Fatima in 1917. She did not come to ask for conversion to any other religion except Catholicism. For instance, she clearly did not intend for it to be Russian Orthodoxy, which the Russians already were at that time.
Right.
She asked for conversion to Catholicism.
Well, she didn't say in the Immaculate Heart will triumph, Russia will become a nicer place, and there will be a period of peace for the world. No. She spoke of the integral conversion of Russia to the faith. And there was a Catholic philosopher, not a Catholic philosopher, a Greek Orthodox philosopher and mystic, Soloviev, writing at the turn of the 20th century, who predicted precisely the return of the Eastern Orthodox to Rome during a decisive moment in history when the reunification of the Church would be instrumental in preventing the total destruction of the Western world by forces coming in from the East, evidently the Chinese. Some threat from the East, maybe even a threat from within Russia itself, repelled from within Russia by a converted Russia. But he himself predicted the eventual and necessary reunification of the Church, a Church centered on Rome, not Moscow, as the Orthodox Church has always been. So there is no possible way around this. Our Lady spoke of the conversion of Russia, and the party line has to get rid of that. We can't have a conversion of Russia to Catholicism. It's not ecumenical. It's not in keeping with the new orientation of the Church. So Evaristo, working from below as a loyal party worker, is attempting to implement the party line with these clumsy interviews of which we have no documentation. And so she says again further on in this pamphlet that conversion just means, moving from the path of evil to the path of good. But where's the path of good in Russia today? Russia today has the highest per capita rate of abortions in the world. There may be more abortions as an absolute number in Red China, but per capita, more abortions in Russia even than in Red China. Moscow is the child pornography center of the world. The Russian population, because of abortion, alcoholism, and so forth, is declining at the rate of 700,000 people a year.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And also, I believe back in the time of Lenin and Stalin, the number of Catholics in Russia numbered approximately 500,000. But in today's world, in our contemporary times, I hear it's around 300,000. So we're actually down 200,000 Catholics in the nation of Russia in today's world versus the time of Lenin and Stalin. I mean, where's the conversion?
Even if you're optimistic about the numbers, you would say that at most there are no more Catholics in Russia today than there were in 1917. But the Catholics who live in Russia today have been corrupted like Catholics throughout the world by not only the errors of Russia, but the developments of those errors in other nations of the Western world. So basically there is now a great falling away, what John Paul II called a silent apostasy. And all you have to do is look at birth rates. Even among the Catholics in Russia, you're not going to see a birth rate that reflects adherence to the Church's teaching on marriage and procreation. You're going to see throughout the Western world and in Russia, European Russia included, nothing less than the culture of death, a decline of populations. People are simply refusing to bring new lives into the world. They're living for the moment, they're living for the day. That's true in Russia as much as, if not more, than it is throughout the Western world. So where is this conversion?
Exactly.
Then, of course, the promise of Our Lady was that when Russia is consecrated, there will be a period of peace. What peace? Now, the party line has to address the obvious problem that the world has been racked by one war after another. And, of course, there's the Holocaust of abortion throughout the world since the so-called consecration of 1984. So where is peace in the world? Evaristo tackles this one in the second pamphlet. Why is there no peace in Russia today, he asks Lucy. Why? And she answers, well, because the wars that exist now are practically not derived from atheism, but are civil wars. This is what Sister Lucy is supposed to have said. Plenty of wars going on, but these are not atheist wars. So Our Lady promised a period of peace consisting of wars that would not be atheistic.
Yeah, so we have to clarify now what we mean by peace.
Yeah. And she says further on in the pamphlet, atheism still exists, but I think it is no longer the atheism that wanted to destroy the faith, the Church, God, and everything that is supernatural. So it's a new friendly atheism as well. Kinder, gentler atheism.
Yeah, I mean, atheism is directly opposed to the Catholic faith. So these are all very confusing statements that the new Sister Lucy is putting forward.
Well,
and it seems to be very in keeping with a lot of the modernist talk that we hear. It's ambiguous, different meanings for words. Atheism all of a sudden is, something that's kinder and gentler.
Yeah, well, of course.
It's whatever they want to make it.
Well, Sister Lucy is an icon. She's an iconic presence on the world stage. She is the last surviving seer of the apparitions at Fatima. And those apparitions, because she is a prophet for our time, were meant to correct our behavior in this time. She didn't come to affirm the status quo. She didn't come to say that the Holy Father will consecrate the world without mentioning Russia, and then we'll have kinder atheism and only civil wars. It's not at all what she said.
When she said that we're going to have peace, she meant it literally.
Yeah.
There's going to be peace across the entire world.
A period of peace. Now, a period of peace means that men will turn from their evil ways in a definitive sense, which can only come with the aid of divine grace and through conversion to Catholicism. They'll stop killing their own children in the womb. They'll stop warring on innocent life in that way. They'll start honoring the teaching of the Church, bringing new life into the world as God has commanded, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. That was always a hallmark of Christian social order, the size of families. We see nothing but social decline on every front. Again, what John Paul II called silent apostasy since the so-called consecration of Russia in 1984. The situation of the world has gotten worse by all indications since the consecration of Russia in 1984. And now people are talking about war in the Middle East, the use of atomic weapons by Israel against Iran. The threat of terrorism is ever present. There's just no indication that this new message of Fatima
as a matter of
bears
fact,
any relation to reality.
Not too long ago in a book, I think General Petraeus came forward and said that the war over in the Middle East and in Afghanistan is something that is going to go on for 50 years.
Right, and now we're hearing talk of the Soviets, the neo-Soviets, I should say, because that's what we see in Russia today, as even Russian activists are saying, a neo-Stalinist dictatorship. The man is now president for life, essentially. Their elections over there are a joke. Not that I'm any great fan of democracy. Look what democracy has done. Yet they pretend to be a democracy. And in fact, they're a dictatorship. Not a monarchy in the Catholic sense, but a dictatorship. Putin is no practicing Christian. The man almost never sees his own wife. All the reports on this man are that he has women on the side. This is not a Christian leader in any sense of the word. And even if he adopts, as we see, some sort of attitude of rapprochement with the Orthodox Church, it's the same old story. The Orthodox Church right now in Russia is being instrumentalized, the way it always was, as an instrument of Soviet nationalism, in this case, neo-Soviet nationalism. The Orthodox Church is a puppet of the Kremlin. It was then, after the Russian Revolution, beginning around 1929, and it is today. We read about this demonstration, which I don't condone. These three arrogant young ladies went into, I forget which Orthodox cathedral it was, and they conducted a mock prayer on the altar to the Virgin Mary, pleading with the Virgin Mary to rid Russia of Putin. Now, that was a desecration. I'm sure they should have received some sort of punishment for disorderly conduct.
Yeah, I think they got 2 years in prison for that.
Instead, they got 2 years in prison. And I would tell you, they didn't get 2 years in prison because they desecrated that cathedral. They got 2 years in prison because they conducted an anti-Putin demonstration that received international attention. 2 years in prison for that. So, again, orthodoxy in Russia is instrumentalized. And we end up, by the time we get through with Evaristo's pamphlet, with an entirely revised message of Fatima, the modernist message.
Yes.
Consecration doesn't mean that Russia must be mentioned. The conversion of Russia doesn't mean a religious conversion. It means some sort of change, a regime change. Our Lady came to predict a regime change.
Yeah, and these points, so we have conversion, consecration, peace, all of these words, which have very clear meanings, and what Sister Lucy had been consistent and talking about for 75 years about the meanings of those words as they pertain to the message of Fatima, all of a sudden they become very ambiguous. And well, what this really means is this, and yeah, don't think that way. It really is about that, and so this seems to be in keeping with the uncertainty of the modernism that has risen in the Church since the Second Vatican Council.
And it's nonsense. And the amazing thing is that Father Gruner's apostolate is in possession of a fax from Evaristo himself. We mentioned this fax in previous episodes. It's the same fax where Evaristo admits that this really wasn't a literal translation. He only typed it. He also says in the same fax that he concedes that what Sister Lucy is alleged to have said involves, and I'm quoting from this fax of November 23rd, 1992, after the first interview, seems to contain contradictory and unlogical things, which at times seem almost craziness.
So he himself is admitting that this is completely inconsistent with everything that Sister Lucy has said throughout the course of her entire life up to that time.
That's right. That's right. And that's right there in his own fax transmission. You can see his fax number to the Fatima Apostolate of Father Nicholas Gruner back in 1992. So he's basically admitting it's a fabrication. But then the whole party line is a fabrication regarding the message of Fatima. So that's where we stand as of the end of 1993 with.
So honestly, we can say with Evaristo, he was. I mean, even though we don't have hard proof of this, we can say that the Vatican Secretary of State, imposing the party line on Fatima from above, put Evaristo up to this. Is that a safe assertion or a safe statement to make?
I would like to know in the first place, what put it into Evaristo's head that he should go to the convent and interview Sister Lucia and prepare a pamphlet? Was this entirely his own idea? And why would he, of all people, be given access to Sister Lucia for the purpose of conducting not one, but 2 interviews which are full of absolute nonsense? Why would he do this? Clearly he had authority from higher up. We know that since around 1960, Sister Lucia has been under virtual house arrest in the convent in Coimbra. She needs special permission to meet with anybody outside her immediate family. So he must have had special permission. And then what permission did he have to publish these pamphlets? He certainly didn't go publish them on his own without consulting with any ecclesiastical authorities. And there was no objection from on high to any of this material that he published in the first or the second pamphlet. On the contrary, he clearly received official approval. Where do you think that approval came from, Richard?
Yeah, well, it had to have come from the Vatican Secretary of State.
Yeah, the Vatican Secretary of State has been managing this affair since probably the early 80s, by my estimation. And I find that curious because the Vatican Secretary of State is not part of the divine constitution of the Church. The Secretary of State was an office created, I forget which pontificate it was sometime in the 1500s that the Secretary of State was first envisaged as a kind of assistant to the Pope in a limited way. But we've noted in a previous segment that after the Second Vatican Council, because of the reform of the Roman Curia, the Secretary of State was mysteriously elevated to the level of a kind of vice pope.
Yes. Who
runs the show on a daily basis at the Vatican. Don't you think it's odd that this Vatican functionary has become a custodian of the message of Fatima?
Well, yeah, yes, because the Secretary of State has no doctrinal authority at all. He has no theological, basically he's a diplomat. He deals with diplomatic affairs for the Vatican, and so it seems rather strange that he should be the custodian of the message of Fatima. But in terms of Evaristo, I think it's important to say that, as you and I are sitting here and discussing this matter, I mean, obviously, we know that wasn't Sister Lucy. He may have sat down and had an interview with her, but the words that are attributed to her are clearly not hers. But the point is that so we can sit here and dissect these pamphlets, but the damage may have been done for a number of people. For somebody who doesn't know anything about Fatima, and the very first thing they read is a pamphlet by Carlos Evaristo, one of his 2 pamphlets, the damage is done. So no matter how ludicrous, the statements that are attributed to Sister Lucy, unfortunately, they did serve a purpose for the party line, and that's one of the things that we're having to do today is undoing some of that damage. Hopefully.
That's right, and those pamphlets are still being bandied about by the proponents of the party line. There was even a series in the Catholic newspaper, The Wanderer, based in large part on these pamphlets, and I've received emails from people saying, well, how can you take this position? Didn't Sister Lucy say in a famous interview in 1992, blah, blah, blah. So you're right, the damage that has been done is incalculable, and maybe that's why Evaristo got the permission he did. Do you think those pamphlets would have seen the light of day if Sister Lucy had said to Evaristo, oh no, Russia must be consecrated explicitly by name, and unless that happens, various nations will be annihilated, as Our Lady said. She's still awaiting the consecration of Russia. It hasn't been done. And oh, by the way, the third secret needs to be revealed in its entirety. And that would bring us to the next segment in this discussion. I guess we could take that up in the next episode, the publication of part of the third secret in the year 2000.
Yes, exactly. And once again, the Vatican Secretary of State will be most prominent, or was most prominent, in the June 26, 2000 press conference. And correct me if I'm wrong, the Pope was actually present, was he not? Or was that?
No, he wasn't. We can discuss that in the next episode.
Yeah, maybe we should actually start with the May 13th, 2000 Mass, at which the Secretary of State sort of preconditioned for the party line. Anyway, I see we're starting to run out of time. So just in closing, as Father Gruner is fond of saying, we should pray the Rosary every day, and also we should implement the first Saturday's devotion as Our Lady requested at Fatima as well. Thank you for being here, and join us for our next episode. Thank you. God bless.